They talked for a while, but as the evening wore on, something shifted. Adaobi moved closer to him, and they both felt the weight of the moment. Obina, unsure of what to do, stood up nervously. In his innocence, he fumbled with his shirt, and before he realized it, he stood before her, in nothing but his natural form. Adaobi gasped and let out a loud scream, startling Obina. He froze, his mind racing. "What is it?" he asked, panicking. "What have I done?" Adaobi was already halfway out the door. "I have to go," she shouted, running into the night. Obina stood there, confused and worried. He looked down at himself, trying to understand what had just happened. "What is it that I have that has made her shout like that?" he muttered to himself. When Adaobi rushed out of Obina's hut that night, she left behind more than just an echo of her scream. She left behind questions that would soon ripple through the entire village of Umuokwe. Obina was born in the quiet village of Umuokwe, surrounded by green hills, winding streams, and farmlands that stretched as far as the eye could see. His mother, Amara, passed away during childbirth, leaving the newborn boy alone in the world. With no relatives to care for him, Obina grew up as an orphan, learning early on how to fend for himself. He had never stepped foot in a classroom, but life's hard lessons had taught him the value of honesty and hard work. From a young age, Obina took up odd jobs to survive. He worked tirelessly on other people's farms, fetched water for the village women, and washed clothes by the river. Despite his hardships, his striking appearance often turned heads. His skin was a deep, smooth black that gleamed under the sun, and his chiseled muscles were a testament to years of manual labor. He had the kind of six-pack that made the village women's hearts race whenever he walked back from the stream, his shirt casually slung over his shoulder. Yet Obina never paid any attention to their advances. Women like Amaka, the playful daughter of the village tailor, and Neka, the widow who always found excuses to invite him to her home, would smile and wink at him, but he simply smiled politely and carried on with his work. His heart belonged to only one girl, Adaobi. Adaobi was the daughter of the village's palm wine tapper, and her beauty was the talk of Umuokwe. She was tall and graceful, with a caramel complexion that seemed to glow in the sunlight. Her laughter was like music, and she had a way of speaking that made people want to listen. Obina admired her from afar for months, unsure of how to approach her. One day, as Adaobi fetched water at the stream, Obina summoned the courage to talk to her. "Good afternoon, Adaobi," he said, his voice steady, despite his nervousness. "Good afternoon, Obina," she replied, smiling. "How are you?" "I'm fine," he said, scratching the back of his neck. I was wondering if you would like to go for a walk with me sometime, by the river or the hills." Adaobi paused, looking at him curiously. She had noticed his kindness and hard work before, but had never thought he would be interested in her. "I don't know," she said teasingly. "Why would I go on a walk with you?" Because you are special to me," Obina said earnestly, his dark eyes meeting hers. Adaobi laughed softly. "All right, Obina, I will go on a walk with you. Tomorrow evening by the river?" "Yes," Obina said quickly. "Thank you, Adaobi." Their first walk by the river turned into many. They laughed, shared stories, and watched the sunsets together. Adaobi grew fond of Obina's honesty and innocence, while Obina felt he had found someone who truly understood him. But Obina's life of solitude meant he didn't always know how to act in certain situations. One evening, Adaobi decided to visit his small hut unannounced. She found him sitting by the flickering light of his oil lamp, fixing a broken wooden stool. "Adaobi," he said, surprised but pleased. "You came." "Yes," she replied, stepping into the hut. "I wanted to see you." Obina smiled and offered her the only chair in the room, sitting cross-legged on the floor himself. They talked for a while, but as the evening wore on, something shifted. Adaobi moved closer to him, and they both felt the weight of the moment. Obina, unsure of what to do, stood up nervously. In his innocence, he fumbled with his shirt, and before he realized it, he stood before her, in nothing but his natural form. Adaobi gasped and let out a loud scream, startling Obina. He froze, his mind racing. "What is it?" he asked, panicking. "What have I done?" Adaobi was already halfway out the door. "I have to go," she shouted, running into the night. Obina stood there, confused and worried. He looked down at himself, trying to understand what had just happened. "What is it that I have that has made her shout like that?" he muttered to himself. When Adaobi rushed out of Obina's hut that night, she left behind more than just an echo of her scream. She left behind questions that would soon ripple through the entire village of Umuokwe. Obina, humiliated and shaken, spent the following week in his small hut, unable to face the world. He avoided the stream, the market, and even the farmland where he worked. Each day, he replayed the moment in his mind, trying to understand what had gone wrong. "What could I have done to scare her like that?" he muttered to himself, pacing back and forth on his dirt floor. The memory gnawed at him, and the silence in his hut only made it worse. Outside, the villagers were buzzing with speculation. Chinedu, the village gossip, was the first to spread the news. "I heard Adaobi ran out of Obina's house screaming like she saw a ghost," he told a group of women at the market. "Ghost? No," Mama Nkechi said, shaking her head. "I heard it was something about Obina himself. Maybe he's hiding something." "What could he possibly be hiding?" Amaka asked, pretending to be indifferent, though her heart raced with curiosity. "Maybe—" Chinedu lowered his voice dramatically. "Maybe he has some kind of strange power. You know, he has no family, no roots. Who knows where he really comes from?" The rumor spread quickly. By the end of the week, everyone in the village had heard a version of the story. Some speculated that Obina had a dark secret, while others claimed he might be cursed. The mystery only deepened the fascination many women already had for him. As Obina stayed hidden, more women in the village became curious about him. Some wanted to comfort him, others wanted to uncover the truth, and a few, like Amaka, saw an opportunity to win his heart. Amaka, who had always been jealous of Adaobi, saw this as her chance. She gathered her closest friends, Neka and Ifeoma, and confided in them. "Do you know what I think?" Amaka said, leaning in. "It must be the size of his manhood that scared Adaobi." Neka gasped. "Amaka, don't say such things." "I'm serious," Amaka said, laughing. "Adaobi is just a small girl. Maybe she couldn't handle him. But me? I'll find out for myself." "How will you do that?" Ifeoma asked, raising an eyebrow. "Leave it to me," Amaka said confidently. "Obina will forget Adaobi soon enough." Amaka began to stalk Obina subtly. She lingered near his hut, pretending to pass by on her way to fetch firewood. She even sent her younger brother with small gifts, fresh fruits, a bowl of soup, but Obina politely declined. After a week of isolation, Obina finally summoned the courage to leave his compound. He couldn't avoid the world forever, no matter how much he wanted to. He picked up his machete and headed for the farm, ignoring the stares and whispers that followed him. "Obina! Long time," Chinedu called out, a sly grin on his face. Obina nodded, but didn't respond. He focused on his work, trying to block out the noise around him. But even as he chopped weeds and tilled the soil, his mind was elsewhere. He thought about Adaobi, about her scream, about the unanswered questions that haunted him. Adaobi, meanwhile, avoided him like a plague. She stopped visiting their usual meeting spots, the river, the forest, the hilltop. She even took longer routes to avoid crossing paths with him. Obina noticed her absence and felt the sting of rejection. One evening, as he sat by the river, he whispered to himself, "What did I do to deserve this?" Weeks passed, and life in the village settled into its usual rhythm. But one day, fate intervened. Obina went to the river to wash some clothes and gather water. As he approached, he saw someone crouched by the water's edge, filling a clay pot. It was Adaobi. His heart raced as he stood frozen, unsure of what to do. He could tell she had seen him, but she pretended to be busy, hoping he would walk away. Instead, Obina dropped the clothes he was carrying and walked toward her. "Adaobi," he called softly. She didn't look up. "Adaobi, please," he said, his voice breaking. "I need to talk to you." Finally, she turned to face him, her eyes guarded. "What is it, Obina?" "I'm sorry," he said, dropping to his knees in front of her. "If I angered you in any way that night, please forgive me. I don't know what I did wrong, but I never meant to hurt you." Tears welled up in Adaobi's eyes. She had been avoiding him, not because she was angry, but because she didn't know how to face him after what she had seen. "It's not your fault, Obina," she said, her voice trembling. "You didn't do anything wrong." "Then why did you scream? Why did you run away?" he asked, desperation in his voice. Adaobi hesitated, her hands shaking as she set down her pot. Because I saw something that night. Something you don't know about yourself." Obina frowned, confused. "What do you mean?" Adaobi took a deep breath, tears streaming down her face. "Obina, you were born different. You have both male and female parts." Her words hit him like a thunderbolt. For a moment, he couldn't breathe, couldn't speak. He stared at her, his mind racing. "That's not possible," he whispered. "It is," Adaobi said gently. "Your aunt must have known. But she didn't tell you. Maybe she was trying to protect you. If the villagers found out, they would have called you an abomination." Obina's knees gave way, and he collapsed onto the ground, sobbing uncontrollably. His entire world shattered in that moment. The identity he had built for himself crumbled under the weight of Adaobi's revelation. "Who am I?" he whispered, his voice filled with anguish. "Am I a man or a woman? What will the villagers say? What will they do to me if they find out?" Adaobi knelt beside him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Obina, you are still you. You are kind, hardworking, and honest. This doesn't change that." But Obina couldn't hear her. His mind was consumed by fear and uncertainty. Should he run away? Should he hide forever? 1,000 questions swirled in his head, and none of them had answers. As the sun set over the river, Obina sat there, tears streaming down his face, the weight of his secret pressing down on him like a heavy stone. The suspense hangs in the air. What will Obina do next? How will the villagers react if they find out? And will Adaobi stand by him, or will the pressure drive them apart? He wiped the tears from her cheeks as she faced Obina. "I'm sorry, Obina. I shouldn't have reacted the way I did that night. It's just, I've never seen anything like that before, and I didn't know how to handle it." Obina, his voice still trembling, asked, "You're not disgusted by me?" Adaobi shook her head firmly. "No, Obina. I was shocked, yes, but never disgusted. You're still the kind, hard-working person I've always known. I'm here for you as a friend, no matter how confusing this is." We'll find a solution together." Her words were a balm to his wounded soul. For the first time in days, Obina felt a flicker of hope. They parted ways at the river, but her promise lingered in his mind. Returning to his compound, however, the weight of reality crushed him once more. The thought of his life being so drastically different from what he had always believed haunted him like a nightmare. He cried until his eyes burned, pacing the small space of his hut. "If I had died at childbirth like my mother, maybe I wouldn't have to go through this pain," he whispered one night, his voice cracking. For 2 days, Obina remained in isolation, barely eating or drinking. The once strong, confident young man who had captured the attention of the village now seemed like a shadow of himself. On the 3rd day, as Obina sat on a small wooden stool in front of his hut, lost in thought, he saw Adaobi approaching. She was carrying a basket of fruits, her expression soft and determined. "I brought these for you," she said, sitting beside him without waiting for an invitation. Obina looked at her, tears welling up again. "Why are you doing this, Adaobi? You don't owe me anything." "I'm doing this because I care about you," she replied, handing him a slice of mango. "You're not alone, Obina. You don't have to face this by yourself." They ate together in silence, Adaobi occasionally cracking jokes to lighten the mood. For the first time in days, Obina smiled faintly. Over the next week, Adaobi came to his compound every day, bringing food and words of encouragement. Her kindness slowly began to pull him out of his despair. As Adaobi spent more time with Obina, the villagers' gossip grew louder. People whispered about what had made her scream and run that night and why she had now returned to him. "She's bewitched," Mama Nkechi said one morning at the market. "No, she knows something we don't," Chinedu replied. "There's a secret between them, and I'll find out what it is." Amaka, however, was the loudest of all. She sat with her friends, Neka and Ifeoma, one evening, fuming with jealousy. "I don't know what Adaobi thinks she's doing, running back to him," Amaka said, her voice dripping with disdain. "But I'll find out his secret, even if I have to seduce it out of him." Neka frowned. "Amaka, you're going too far." Amaka ignored her. "What could it be? A big cassava? A tiny carrot? Whatever it is, I'll know soon enough," she said, laughing loudly. Unbothered by the rumors, Adaobi began doing some research. She discovered that there was a medical center in a nearby village where they might find help. One evening, as she sat with Obina, she shared her findings. "There's a doctor there," she said. "Maybe he can help us understand what's going on." Obina hesitated. "Adaobi, I have no money for something like that." "I know," she replied. "But let's go anyway. We can at least ask questions and see what our options are. This isn't something you should have to carry alone." Obina nodded, his gratitude shining in his eyes. "Thank you, Adaobi. I don't know what I'd do without you." At home, Adaobi's father noticed her absence from their usual evening meals and pressed her for answers. "Why are you always with Obina?" he asked one night, his tone firm. "What's going on between the two of you?" Adaobi hesitated, but then replied, "Papa, Obina is going through something, and I'm helping him. Please trust me." Her father frowned, but decided not to push further. Early one morning, Adaobi and Obina set off for the nearby village. The journey was long, and they walked for hours under the scorching sun, stopping occasionally to rest. Along the way, Adaobi tried to keep the mood light, telling stories and making jokes. When they finally arrived, the medical center was a modest building, surrounded by a small courtyard. The doctor, a middle-aged man with a kind face, welcomed them into his office. After Obina explained his situation, The doctor conducted a thorough examination. He then took some samples and told them it would take a few days to run tests. When the results were ready, the doctor called them into his office. His expression was serious as he gestured for them to sit. "I have good news and bad news," he began. "The good news is that Obina's condition is rare but not unheard of. It's something called intersex, a person born with both male and female reproductive organs. He can still bear children." Obina's hands trembled as he listened. "The bad news," the doctor continued, "is that this condition often requires surgery or other treatments to fully address, and these treatments can be very expensive. You've already told me you can't afford much, so we're at a crossroads." Obina and Adaobi exchanged a look, sadness filling their eyes. The weight of the doctor's words settled heavily on their shoulders. "What do we do now?" Obina asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The doctor sighed. "That's up to you. But whatever you decide, know that this doesn't define who you are. You're still a human being deserving of love and respect." As they left the doctor's office, Obina and Adaobi walked in silence, the enormity of their situation sinking in. Adaobi reached for his hand and squeezed it gently. "We'll figure this out, Obina," she said, though her own voice wavered with uncertainty. Obina stopped walking and turned to her, tears streaming down his face. "You've already done so much for me, Adaobi. You don't have to stay." Adaobi's eyes filled with determination. "I made a promise to myself that I would never betray you, Obina. I'm not leaving." But deep down, both of them knew they were standing at the edge of a daunting journey, with no clear answers and an uncertain future. Would they find a way to raise the money for treatment? Would the villagers ever accept Obina if his secret came to light? Or would the weight of their circumstances drive them apart? The path ahead was unclear, but one thing was certain. Their bond was about to be tested like never before. After leaving the doctor's office, Obina and Adaobi had a deep conversation about their future. They came to terms with the fact that they would never have the millions needed for surgery abroad. Besides, the doctor had assured them that Obina could still father children. One evening, as they sat under the moonlight, talking about their hopes and dreams, Adaobi reached out and kissed Obina. His heart pounded in his chest, his eyes filled with excitement. She took his hand and led him into his hut, and that night became the most memorable of his life. A few months later, Obina formally asked for Adaobi's hand in marriage. Her parents gave their blessing, and 2 years into their union, they welcomed their first child, a baby boy. In the years that followed, their family grew, blessed with 2 more children. Despite the challenges they faced, their marriage was filled with love, laughter, and understanding. Obina's secret remained safe with Adaobi, and she stood by him through everything. Just because someone is born different does not mean they should be treated differently. They deserve love and respect, just like everyone else. Moral lessons from the story. True love is unconditional. Adaobi loved Obina, despite his differences, and stood by him when the world judged him. Real love is about acceptance and support. Strength is not just physical. Obina's journey shows that true strength lies in resilience, self-acceptance, and perseverance through life's challenges. Judgment can be cruel. The villagers were quick to gossip and make assumptions, highlighting the dangers of prejudice and societal pressure.